Hey, Joe here from Home Studio Corner. As you know, I use Presonus Studio One as my recording software. They just announced a new version 4.5 yesterday. I'm about to download the update and see what the fuss is all about. Let's dive in. Okay, version 4.5 is installed. I'm going to open a recent mix. This is actually the song that we're mixing inside of Dueling Mixes this month. A collaboration between Graham Cochran and Ill Factor. Very cool song. If you want to mix it yourself, go to duelingmixes.com. So what I'm going to do is just show you some of the features that they've added that I think are cool and will actually make a difference and apply to me and my use of Studio One. This will not be an exhaustive video because I feel like exhaustive videos aren't really helpful for anyone. I'd rather show you the practical stuff that actually applies to me. And if you want to dive in, you can always download the release notes and read every single thing they added. They added a bunch of MIDI stuff, which is cool. I just don't use MIDI stuff, so I'm going to talk about the stuff that applies to me. Narcissistic? Possibly, but it keeps the video short because I don't want to waste your time and I want to get back to making music. So I've highlighted a few things that I think are pretty cool. So the first thing has to do with the input mixer. If you didn't know, on the mixer page, down in the bottom left corner, you've got these extra buttons here. And I don't use them as much as I probably could, but this input section is super interesting. This shows you, and you can drag the size to see, you can see basically every input on your interface. So this is like looking at meters. While you do have meters on the channels themselves, you can actually see this is the input the input meter of my voice coming into my interface, which happens to be the Studio Live mixer. What they've added is pretty cool. They've added the ability to adjust the gain and the polarity coming into the software. So these are still software controls, but if you were driving a preamp really hard and needed to turn it down at the input to keep it from clipping the converter, you can do that here. It may still clip the converter, but you can make it not be super loud in your DAW, and you can also flip the polarity right here before it gets recorded. So this is still digital processing, but it happens before it gets recorded onto the track. You could even go so far as to add plugins here. That's always been a feature for a long time, but the newest thing is adding this gain and polarity, which is handy. Will I use it? I don't know, but it's good to know that it's there. If I'm doing drums, the problem is I've got a lot of these controls on my mixer. If I have just an interface and I'm recording top and bottom snare and I don't have the ability to flip the polarity on my interface, that's a great way to do that to make sure that just gets baked in. Next thing, software input gain and polarity controls on every channel, bus, and effects channel. That to me is super duper cool. Let's see if we can figure out how to make it show up. Audio device controls, input controls. I'm going to guess that's it. This is great. So after everything's recorded, when you're in mixing mode, you can add this new window that allows you to flip the polarity of both sides for stereo channels, or if we're looking at mono channels, which I've got the vocal right here, a single mono track, I can flip the polarity there. I can also adjust the gain of the signal. So you may know I like to go in and do a lot of clip gain. So if this vocal's just too quiet or too loud, I'll go in and actually just adjust the volume of the file itself. Just because that's fairly simple. I don't have to add any plugins to do that. Another way people have done that is by using the Mix Tool plugin, which I've always thought is a super handy plugin that essentially just gives you the ability to invert the phase or adjust the gain of the signal. Well, they've basically made the Mix Tool plugin obsolete. And that's fine with me because now it's right here. If I'm thinking that vocal's just too quiet, I need it to be louder, I can just go whoop. There we go. We've boosted it 11 dB. It'd be nice if that wasn't quite so dramatic, but I'm sure we can adjust it by holding down Shift to make it a little more subtle and fine-tune the adjustments. So that's pretty cool. I like that. Groups. They've done some stuff with groups. And here's the one thing I think is cool about that. You may know, if you do something like, let's take these drum tracks up here. If we group all of these drum tracks together, the normal kind of everyday way of grouping the tracks means that everything gets grouped. We can name the group drums, but now if we select things and move them, they move together as a group. The other thing that happens is if we move one of the faders, it moves all the other faders. And that's fine, but sometimes you just want to be able to edit it but still be able to move individual faders. I want everything to edit together as a group, but I want to be able to move the kick drum up and down without moving everything else. And I'd rather not have to go back and forth between engaging and disengaging the group or turning the group on and off, which is kind of the way you had to do it before. So what's cool is they give you the option, and I got to find out where it is real quick. Hold on. Okay, here it is. If you expand this kind of track count over here, and then you've got this little three dudes standing next to each other. That's your group settings. Now you can come in and you can actually do some things to the group. So what I can say is I want the editing to stay grouped. I want all the drums to stay together when I'm editing them, but volume and muting and inserts and everything else I don't want. I want this to just be an edit group. So now check out what happens. I come over here. I can edit the drums together. I can chop them up, mix them around, quantize, do whatever I want to do. But then if I'm coming over here and I want to move the kick drum, look, I can just move the kick drum and none of the other faders move. That's pretty handy. Next thing I like, global pre-fader meter option. If you just right-click on any of the meters on a channel and select pre-fader metering, now all the faders will show level even if you bring the fader all the way down. That's been a common complaint. If I start mixes sometimes where I take the entire all the tracks and bring them down to 0 and I want to start bringing them up. Problem is the meters would show that there's nothing there until I turn the fader up because they were post-fader meters. But with pre-fader metering, I can see that there's, let me show you. I can hit play. All the faders are down, but I can see which channels have sound on them. So then I can turn them up. Okay, one final thing that's super fun for me, import and export IO setup. So if you come over to your mixer window and click on IO, it shows you this grid that we're used to seeing where you can assign and label all your inputs and outputs. The problem is that historically has been saved with the song and not just globally on anything you open up. So if I open up a session I recorded a few years ago and I've added new inputs or outputs or new channels, or I've just changed the way I set up these inputs and outputs, I've had to just manually take 10 minutes or 5 minutes to go set it up again like I want it, literally adding in all the different channels that I want and routing them to the right place. Well, now we can import and export our settings. So I can very quickly, whatever the current setup is that I like, I can export it and I can save it to my Dropbox folder. And then whenever I open a session and it's not how I want it to be, maybe someone sent me a session and I'm opening that, or I'm opening an old session that I used to do a different way, I can just come in here, import, go find that file, and it'll just change everything just like that to the setup that I want. I really, really like that. That's a handy little small feature, but it definitely makes it a little more convenient. Okay, so that wraps up the handful of new features that I really like in Studio One version 4.5. What I love about Presonus, they listen to us. There have been a number of times, whether it was when I was using version 1, version 2, version 3, where I would send them an email and say, hey, it would be nice if Studio One did this. And in the very next update, it would have the thing that I requested. That has happened a number of times. While Presonus has some pretty awesome, huge features, they've also got just a lot of small features that make your life easier. It's one of the many reasons why I switched all those years ago from Pro Tools to Studio One, and I still love it, and they're still making it better. Now, obviously, Presonus is a sponsor of Home Studio Corner, but honestly, I would use their gear even if they weren't. I just like them a lot, and I like the stuff they make. Thanks so much for watching this video. Let me know what are your favorite new features in Studio One. Leave a comment below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.